All right. Welcome to Clear Vision Wednesday. I am Claudia Mühlenweg. I am the holistic vision coach, teaching you every Wednesday how to improve your eyesight. And many Wednesdays like today, I have amazing guests, and we're going to dive deep into specific topics that are related to eyesight and how you can use those aspects or tools to improve your own eyesight. And today I'm going to bring her on stage. I have Dr. Rajka Milanovic Galbraith. Hi.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm super excited to kind of share with your audience all the wisdom I've learned to further improve their eyesight from what you're already doing.
Right. So you are a functional medicine medical doctor, right? You are like known as the go-to doctors for other doctors. And you just published a book. And our topic today is mitochondria, right? Mitochondria, those little cells, little battery powered, whatever you want to, batteries in each cell. So tell us a little bit and you also, I think, specialize in anti-aging, which is also, of course, for the eyes, right? We want to keep our eyes young and youthful. So tell us a little bit, how did you get into this whole field?
Yeah. So when I was a young girl, I had three dreams. First dream was to become a doctor. The second dream was to have my own family. And the third dream was just to cure, just about everyone. And through my own health hiccups, all three of these dreams were almost not actualized. And it really took to the point of where, I was given one diagnosis, maybe felt a little better than the next diagnosis and was treated. But I really wish someone knew what I learned. But, after 10 years of studying functional medicine and got really good at it, because it would have saved the endpoint where, we were on the celebratory trip in Sri Lanka. We were celebrating having lived in the Middle East for 8 years as expats where we worked, where I was able to have some time off with my kids. I was celebrating having started to overcome the fatigue that was quite debilitating. And then celebrating that we were moving back to the US for me to take my first job in functional medicine. And I should have been really happy. And I wasn't. I was actually terrified because my liver was failing and nobody knew why. And it was really all had to do with mitochondria and how I detoxified, I later learned. But I was fortunate in that I had another functional medicine doctor give me a very precise protocol and I followed it. And then I turned around and for the last decade have now reversed some symptoms. A lot of it starts with just this low-lying fatigue. And I challenge any of your listeners, even if you don't think you're fatigued, and I'm going to go through an inventory when we get a chance after I kind of get done telling my story to prove that most people acclimate to this lower level. So I've not only reversed thousands of people, but with this book, it's called Energized, Feel Fantastic Forever. It just came out on last Wednesday for pre-order. It rose to first in 3 categories on Amazon, beating even Dr. Peter Attia, who is a longevity expert and has his own podcast, as well as Anthony Ewan. So Peter was 2, Dr. Anthony Ewan was 3, and I was number 1. And that, we know that is not static. It changes based on time. I'll have to look today and see what it shows. But it's really to get the message out there. And it was all because I didn't want to leave my children without a mommy, because I really thought I was going to die if I didn't take steroids. And the mortality of what they ultimately found was that they were convinced I had autoimmune hepatitis. And without steroids, the death rate back then, 10 years ago, was 50% in 3 to 5 years if I didn't take the steroids. And it's been 10 years, no steroids, and I was never given the official diagnosis.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm so glad that you're here and vibrant and healthy to share more with our listeners. So let's maybe explain mitochondria a little bit. Like, what does it mean? You touched on fatigue and energy, but like, how does it all work? And then obviously we also want to talk about vision as part of the mitochondrial health.
Yeah. So mitochondria, like you alluded to, it's the powerhouse of our cell. It's where our energy is made. So that makes us feel vibrant. And with age, the number of mitochondria we have go down in number. So 40 over, they're going to decrease. And even exercise will boost them, the number. But what I found is if you're not doing something from a nutrient, that's vitamin and mineral standpoint, to support mitochondria, then you're going to have dysfunctional mitochondria. And the top 3 symptoms that we typically see rhyme, and they're pain, brain, and drain. And how it's relevant to vision is our eyes have a really high number of mitochondria, along with our ears and then the brain. So that's why as we age, almost everyone has visual changes. Myself included, it took till I was 50 till I needed glasses. And just by doing some of the things that I've been doing with general diet, lifestyle, and even the nutrients and even the anti-aging, I was able to reduce that reading prescription. And there are days that I don't need them. So the more in balance I'm at, and the goal is over the next 3 to 6 months is to completely eliminate my reading glasses.
Yes. Awesome. So, okay, so they're basically the little batteries, and you said we have more of them in the eyes and the brain, and actually the retina, right, is part of the brain. So what are symptoms that you see of mitochondria failing? You talked about your liver, right, earlier, hepatitis. Mm-hmm. So what are, you talked about brain, drain, and pain. So basically that's a lot of things, right? That feels like that's almost everything in terms of issues.
So being subtly fatigued, I don't have the energy. People see their doctor, the doctor says, nothing's wrong, your labs are normal. That's the drain or fatigue. The brain is where you walk into a room and you can't remember why you walked into the room, or you're having trouble word finding or not remembering names as well. That's the brain, meaning that little bit of brain fog where you're not as sharp as you used to be for recall. And pain, it's that where you worked out 5 days ago and you're still achy, or you get up first thing in the morning and you're a little bit stiff. So that's the kind of what we're first going to see. And believe it or not, those are the symptoms, but there's almost every disease is associated with mitochondrial dysfunction. It just hits our eyes and ears and brain quicker than the rest of our bodies. But cardiovascular disease, so heart attack and strokes, obesity, diabetes. So it's almost all has that mitochondrial dysfunction. And even though my book is called Energized, it's really about mitochondrial dysfunction. But who's going to buy a book on fix your mitochondria? No one's going to buy a book on that. They all want energy, right? Who doesn't want, type in the chat if you want more energy. I'd love to hear from some of the participants. Do you want more energy? 2 things. I would love to ask a series of questions that I want the audience to answer yes or no to. Does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah. And those on YouTube can do the same thing. So anybody here watching live on YouTube, you can also do the same thing.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise our hands, all of us. So we'll have our hands up. So keep your hand up if you have all the energy you did when you were a kid. So do you have all, and if you do, keep it up. Okay. And if you don't, put it down. So you're already out of the race.
Depends on the day for me, for sure.
Yeah. Say on most days, right?
Most days, yes.
And not where something extraordinary happened. So meaning that you weren't sleep deprived because there was some kind of alarm went off and you had to evacuate your house, or you're on a red eye flight. I hear some days. So I'm sorry, you have to put your hands down. Whoever answered some days, I'm just teasing you, though I say that kindly. Lower your head. So if you eat all organic, keep your hands up. And if you don't, put your hands down. Because right now, and we do too, the pesticides are going to take out your mitochondria. So toxins damage our mitochondria. And here is why, is that the mitochondria has DNA that only comes from mom, and it's not protected in a protective coating called a histone, whereas the rest of our body's DNA is. So the mitochondria get exposed, and it's not 1 year, it's usually decades. So if you're not eating organic, so answer yes or no in your mind. Do you take a set of core supplements to include a multivitamin, fish oil, vitamin D? And the vitamin should have minerals. So if you do, you can keep your hands up. If you don't, then you're already behind the 8 ball, because you're going to be deficient in the vitamins and minerals you're going to need to detoxify, and the vitamins and minerals. And preferably the B vitamins in that multivitamin are methylated or have active B vitamins. And then kind of lower or keep your hands up if you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep and you feel refreshed most days. Yeah, me too, right? Because we prioritize sleep. Me and Claudia know what to do.
Number one is sleep, honestly.
I know. So if you're not sleeping, okay, so if you don't eat organic, you're not taking core supplements, don't have the energy as a kid, you're not sleeping 8 hours, don't feel refreshed. And then keep your hands up if you do something on a regular basis to regulate stress. So if you're not regulating stress, choose through your B vitamins, and magnesium, and those are needed to fuel your mitochondria. So you're going to be depleted. And I'll tell you my theory. And then we can go on down the list of it. The biggest killers of the mitochondria are going to be the vitamin and mineral deficiencies, stress, which is compounded by poor sleep, and toxins. Those are your top three. And here's, if it's okay, Claudia, I'd love to share my theory on why this happens, and very subtly. Okay, here's how people acclimate. And I could say, if you really felt like you, so type in the chat, are you one of the ones, did you get through that? You still have hands up still? One person did say yes. So she eats all organic, hands up. But, if you have your hand up, I'm going to still challenge you and say, I bet you if I tested you, the thing that you're going to feel is 100% of people who work with me that come in for health optimization say, oh my God, I didn't realize I could feel this fantastic. And so they say that in a very quick time, 4 to 6 weeks. And so that's why I'd like to challenge people to question, are you really having all the energy you need? So my theory on why do the mitochondria take a hit? Why do people acclimate to this lower level energy and then don't really feel it is, we're all born with vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And I've been tracking this for a decade in my office. So I do nutrient panels on everyone. Sometimes we do a specialty panel where we can see the vitamin and mineral status for an average of 3 months. That's kind of pretty cool because, 1 day or 2 days or a week of not taking vitamins or eating well is not going to affect that. It's 3 months. And we will measure, and it used to be 3 to 5 vitamins and minerals were deficient in adults back a decade ago. Now for adults, it's about 7 to 10. And the younger you are, my 20-year-olds are 10 to 15. Anyone under the age of 15 is more like 15 to 20. Those.
And why is that? Why is that?
The brown diet, the screens in the eye affecting the sleep, and then just the stressors. I feel bad for today's younger generation. The stressors are extremely, and so your vitamin and mineral deplete, you're not going to make energy as well. You'll have a reserve, and it just depends on how your detox status is. So then you get stressed as with age, and stress is going to do this, right? It's going to go up and down, and you can't do anything about what you're exposed to, but you can teach your body how to regulate stress. And we can get into that in a little bit. And we can go through my 3D protocol to maximize not only your mitochondria and energy, but your eyesight is, and then you throw in a little toxins. So the toxins and a little age. So toxins take out the mitochondria, age decrease the number we make, and it's a vicious cycle. So stress depletes nutrients, not eating a solid diet or taking foundational supplements depletes the ability to make energy. And then it goes like this. So you really got to get it.
Genetics? What about, because I usually hear age and genetics, like it's not my fault. I can't do anything about it. And What is your take? I know I interrupted you. I don't know if you were finished.
No, I was absolutely finished. So thank you, Claudia. You're so sweet. The genetics play a role. And so that's another area I got really good at very quickly because I had cases that I couldn't crack. And I said, I couldn't crack these cases. Why are these people not getting better? And I went down the nutrigenetics pathway. And all that means is bypassing defective genes with vitamins and minerals. And what I tell people is it's never just the genes. You always have to look at the history with the symptoms, with the labs, with the genes. However, if you get someone who's really sick, you can turn off genes that aren't defective, making them look defective, or you can turn off the gene mutations with a good diet lifestyle. Conversely, you can have a gene that's not mutated and it can act like it's mutated. And I just had a case of a 15-year-old boy who has a chronic condition, and based on testing, he should be something we call an overmethylator, requiring, unfortunately, it's a terminology that another doctor uses that I don't love, but requiring more folate, so B9. And so I gave him a little bit and it made him ragey, irritable. And so that's not good because it'll go to suicide very quick. This is why you have to be careful when you're supplementing. But we ran another test that looked at how he was methylating. So his genes showed one thing, but then when we measured values, it looked like he was under methylating. So that was a classic example of that gene. Those genes are turned off when they shouldn't have been. And so that's just because he'd been sick for very long. So, and his sleep had been profoundly affected. So you got to be really careful. And what I say is I can reverse engineer the genetics. I can kind of figure out what is at play based on symptoms, labs, and disease. So it's pretty cool about that. And there's someone's chiming in on, we can answer later about epigenetics. And you're right, epigenetics are strong, but here's my other theory. with our chronically toxic society, from Wi-Fi to, constant exposure to stimuluses on social media and our phones, to, our soil being nutrient deplete, and you name it, all of that I worry that we're not going to at some point be able to override it. And I have, over the last 3 years, so since the pandemic, have never seen sicker patients come through my door. Never, ever, ever, to this extent where they are completely disabled by their symptomatology. And so then I do pay attention to the genetics, and I support it wisely. And what that means is you got to be careful when you get, and I just did an Instagram reel on a vitamin called NAD. And if you give NAD, if you get too much in the body, so it's never good just to supplement with NAD. Chronically ill, maybe. And so that's a different story. I'm talking about if you're just tired, because you can shut down methylation, and methylation is what's required to turn off defective gene. And so that's why you have to be careful. You have to be very, very careful. So
it's really amazing how complicated our body chemistry is. And I'm working with a doctor as well, because, a lot of times we hear, there's popular podcasts out there, and take this, take that, like you said, it's not just taking a good quality. A lot of them don't even have what's in it. But then also, like you said, you can turn on bad genes, and it's kind of a chemistry lab, where you might have that big explosion because you don't know what the heck you're doing. So that's so interesting. And I do want to hear your 3D approach. I'm just curious. So since we talked about genes a little bit, what genes are affecting the mitochondria and the vision? I'm curious if there's what specific ones, if there are any.
Yeah, so I really equate it back to our detox genes. And so I have a few favorite ones that, believe it or not, I've found, I have this, 35% of our population is extremely sick with environmental illness. And so in those patients, I've found this pattern of genes that are mutated, and every single one but one in the last decade has this pattern. So I'm going to start talking about it. So I'm just going to give the audience just an overview. It's not to make you a biochemist, but I will say you better go to, if you're the sicker you are, you better go to someone who understands the biochemistry, because then you don't get into trouble, because what we call upstream and downstream effects. So you're not turning things off unintentionally. But every day when our body makes energy, we do produce a byproduct that can be helpful and harmful depending on the amount, and that's called a free radical. So every time we make energy, or ATP, we produce free radicals, and in that instance, it's called superoxide. A little bit is good because it helps us fight infections. Too much is bad because it's going to start destroying our tissue. So in our eyes, it's going to degenerate our vision, and our brains and our joints for osteoarthritis. That free radical needs to be neutralized. So I look at the genes that neutralize free radicals. And one gene is called SOD, and that's called superoxide dismutase. You don't have to remember that, but the gene to neutralize that free radical, if it's not functioning, you'll get an overabundance. And then that, what they call that, it's such a funny thing. The superoxide radical is OH. And then if there's too much of it and you're not neutralizing it, O converts to oh no. And oh no is the actual chemical ONOO minus. So O to oh no is bad. Just think about the words. Oh no. Okay, I love that. Isn't that a good way to remember it? When it converts to oh no, that's peroxynitrite, and that's going to go and really destroy tissues. So it's that conversion. So you got to neutralize it. But what you get in that first chemical process is hydrogen peroxide. So think about, when do women use hydrogen peroxide in their lives? Okay, so bleach is
getting stains out of laundry, yeah.
Yeah, so yes, but then it bleaches our hair for those that want to have some blonde highlights. But if you can't further break that down, the symptoms you'll see when someone doesn't further neutralize that is they'll have premature graying, and that's me. So I was prematurely gray probably by the time I was 30, whole head of hair. Thank goodness for some natural color. I can be any color I want. I don't have to be gray. Although I've thought about embracing that gray, we'll see. Or you can get heartburn. So I had both symptoms.
Me too. I had heartburn really, really, really bad. But what prematurely graying, just to be clear, like I think my hair started turning gray like late 40s. So what is prematurely?
No, 30s. You're looking at.
Oh, okay. No, that didn't.
I'm not talking a little bit. I'm talking where my whole head of hair was gray. 30s.
Wow. No. Okay. God. Okay. Good to know for everybody here. Okay.
And stress will do it too. And it is true. Stress will turn off some of the genes that are. So stress doesn't do it directly. It turns off the chemical process. So that's not a lie. You'll get grays from that. Lots of things. And then you can neutralize the hydrogen peroxide either using glutathione or using catalase. So one goes to water and oxygen. So let's talk about glutathione. So you need to be able to make glutathione, and then you require certain nutrients, glycine, cysteine. So people will talk about using N-acetylcysteine, and I say that's not a bad idea in those who don't have too many issues to support the detox of our livers in general. N-acetylcysteine, some people know, because doctors will know this. If you go into liver failure from taking an overdose of Tylenol and you are caught early enough before you die and you're given IV N-acetylcysteine, you can reverse the failing liver, but it's got to be early enough. So it is a potent liver detoxifier, but in some people, it's not going to be enough because you need to then convert it. And there's just so many different steps. So glutathione is the one gene that there are three main ones that help produce it. And there's GSTM1, GSTT1, and GSTP1. And two of those three main genes, you can have 0 copies, 1 copy, or 2 copies. And what your audience should know is that for genes, you typically have 2 copies, one from mom or dad. But in this instance, you can only have 1 or 0. And 2 of those 3 genes, I have 0. And in the third one, that's very important to make glutathione, I have 1 mutation. So I'm like, I have one leg to stand out of 6, right? So I'm already behind the 8 ball. And that's why. So let me give you an example of how this manifested in me clinically, because that's what your audience is going to remember. Like, how did
you have some stories? Yeah.
So in my 40s, I'd said that we had lived in the Middle East for 8 years. And so in my 40s, they had nice vacation schedules, 6 weeks. So I'd bring the kids back to the US to see my family for 6 weeks. Going west, no problem. Going east, it would first take me 1 week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, then 4 weeks to recover from jet lag. And in 2012, I was attending my first functional medicine conference. And IFM has the applying AFMCP, applying functional medicine to clinical practice. And I was a day or two before I was going to leave. It's a 5-day conference. And I was just happened upon a booth, and the gentleman said, "Oh, you must be so excited to go see your kids." I said, "I am, but I am not looking forward to 4 weeks of jet lag and just feeling like utter crap." And he says, "Oh, here, take some glutathione. Like, start it right now, twice a day, best on an empty stomach. This is liposomal. It'll get to where it needs to go." And he goes, "Oh, and go get some melatonin to regulate the circadian rhythm." So I did exactly as he said, and in 3 days it was gone. So it should have been my tip off, but I didn't, that was my first conference. So you're not going to learn genetics at the first conference. Right. Yeah. And I should have, so I was on it for about 9 months, and it was really a piece to that puzzle of what had taken me out, was that I wasn't making it. I wasn't clearing toxins. I had switched, one of my medications I switched, and I wasn't clearing it. So it actually built up and that was the trigger for my immune system. So it was so many things, plus gut bugs. There's so much stuff going on, but yeah, that's why you want to know. So glutathione is super important. Do you just give glutathione? No, same thing, because you can shut other things off. But in my instance, I'll support it. So most days I take a single dose. When I fly, I take a dose twice a day. When I fly, the whole time I'm there, and when I come back for a week, and then I back it down. And then sometimes I can forget. If I'm off it for 3 months, oh, you better bet your bottom dollar. I feel it. I'm starting to get a little bit less energy. Not bad, but I never ever want to be in that kind of situation where I'm not detoxifying and, oh, my liver's failing. And, next time it could be something worse. And then the catalase gene is typically what I say is you just don't give SOD alone, because you don't want to break it down to hydrogen peroxide. You give SOD catalase is a popular combination, or giving SOD with glutathione. And clinically, I walked a woman, I'll give you a case example, then we'll talk about my 3D protocol, if that's okay. So I had a woman come in with rheumatoid arthritis. She didn't come to see me with that because she developed that in the 1 month that she was waiting to see me. So she had recurrent miscarriages, and I had become the nutrigenetics experts. And if you have a mutation in MTHFR, can lead to recurrent miscarriages. And unfortunately, she gets diagnosed with acute rheumatoid arthritis. So she got online, started an autoimmune paleo diet, and I walked her through my 3D protocol. And at one instance, I said, let's add some SOD and catalase to see. And it was within the 3D. So it was kind of probably somewhere the second or third step. I said, let's try this, because she kept getting better, but she had this residual joint pain. And it was all the steps cumulatively in that SOD and catalase that finally got her pain-free. And what happened was she lived abroad, but had seen me once in the US. And then I gave her all the steps and we would meet virtually. I think I saw her the 3 times, but I sent her out with a variety of things to continue to try. I didn't hear from her for 18 months. And I thought, I was kind of cringing, why do we assume they didn't get better when they don't see us? And when I got her on the phone, I said, hey, I haven't seen you for 18 months. I said, how's your rheumatoid arthritis? She was like, rheumatoid arthritis, I feel like I never had it. And so it was that shocking. And so we reverse engineered. I didn't know all her genetics at the time. I just had my protocol, right? And I went through and it really made sense. So she had the inability to break down pesticides. She was living in a country where she wasn't able to get all organic. She didn't know how to detoxify from them. She had mutations in SOD, as well as in the glutathione genes. So now we know, and now she knows how to support herself. But again, the reason why we're talking so much about genetics and detox genetics is because toxins are going to be that linchpin that over time, depending on what your detoxification capability, I said small, medium, or large. If you have a small ability to detox, you're going to be the ones that have your vision's going to go sooner. So maybe your 30s, early 40s. If you got medium, maybe it'll be your 40s. You got a big bucket, maybe later. And then also, it has to do with your eye curvature, and I don't know all the ins and outs of optometry, but yeah, so that's why we talked about it. But I'm happy to dive in. I'd love to hear any questions about what I just
we've got some questions on YouTube. This is I think a lot of us, if I would have heard this 5 years ago, I was like, what are you talking about? I can't follow you, but we have some really advanced listeners here. And so, and I've heard some of these things before, but I think the gist of what you said before I get to the questions is really that, working with a trained expert in nutrigenomics and knowing exactly versus just popping some supplements, even if you buy high quality ones, because we do have a question here. Grace is asking, I don't understand why I can't get enough sleep when I take all the vitamins that you mentioned every day. So, right, I think we kind of covered that a little bit, if I assume correctly, right, about the detox and how the genetics and all of that plays a really complicated game, right?
Yeah. And so that's actually, so I told you it's my 3D protocol. I kind of lied, because if I told people it was 9 steps, they'd be like, I'm not doing 9 steps. 3D is foundationals. Then I have 3 S's and 3 M's. And Claudia, I'd be happy to oblige your listener, because it sounds like she has a valid concern. I can talk about that first, or it's the second S is sleep. Would that be okay? Because it is slightly different.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So sleep, here's what I tell. And I named my clinic Simply Health Institute, because health has to be simple. So if I can't explain it simply, then people won't understand it. If I can't really pare it down, that first visit, we try to do 3 diet lifestyle, 3 supplements, testing, it depends. But the sicker someone is, that list grows, and then we give them a stepped approach. And it's got to be the right order, because you can make someone very sick. So if you detoxify someone and they don't have the right nutrients to detoxify, they can get the toxins when they break down, become even more toxic to our bodies. And that's why juice fasts do not have amino acids. They don't have protein in juice fast, very little. Okay. Some of the green veggies have higher protein, but not enough to detox. And then that's why someone who's been very unhealthy, they do a juice fast and they get stuck with those more active toxic metabolites, and they feel bad. Not all. The more healthy you are, I've done juice fast before, I typically support them with amino acids and I feel great. That's a whole nother story. But with sleep, I explain it as that, clearly in order to sleep, the thing that needs to decrease is cortisol. So cortisol should be like a rolling hill, high in the morning and then roll downhill and be low before you go to bed. And the most common thing I'm seeing in those that aren't my chronically ill patients is, first step is that you're just high all the time. Those people are just wired all the time. That's a stress response that's been ongoing more than a month or 2 or 3. Okay. After a while, your body says, oh, forget about you, Claudia. You're asking too much of me, your adrenal glands. So you don't pump it out. And so then when we measure cortisol in the morning, it's low. People wake up sluggish, slow to wake. They're tired. And then throughout the day, it slowly escalates. And by the time you rest, the body said, oh, thank goodness, Claudia, I can finally catch up with your demands. And your adrenal glands spit out more. If it's high at night, what you'll see is that people can have trouble falling asleep and or that middle of the night wakening. But there are 3 or 4 other causes of middle of the night waking. And I see a lot of women's names in here. So if there's a lot of women in the audience, as you age, the progesterone drops. So it's that imbalance between estrogen and progesterone that'll wake you up in the middle of the night. And when you fix that, go back to sleep. Number 2 is if you're eating carbs. So anything that's higher in carb and it's not balanced with protein and fats, either you're eating the carbs too close to bed or you don't eat a balanced dinner, that wakes you up. Because what happens is, especially if you have a glass or 2 of wine before bed, that's like the worst thing you can do for sleep is, the blood sugar will drop. And as it drops, that's what wakes you. So and I've had people say, oh, I have to take a snack with a little fat before bed. And so then we talk about, why don't we move that back to dinner? Because we ideally don't want to be eating a couple hours before bed. Yeah. And so then, so we talked about stress response, low progesterone, too high of sugars, and parasites can do it too, but I'm seeing that less, but it can. So if someone's awakening. And then lastly, what was affecting me, I do a lot of longevity stuff. So I did a peptide to increase the function of my pineal gland. And so I was first affected by progesterone, like every other woman, but I am happy to say perimenopause was a little bit of this, not bad, because I'd spent like 5 years before I hit perimenopause and added in the progesterone, sleeping. 2 years later, not sleeping, got balanced on hormones, still not sleeping. Your pineal gland is responsible for making melatonin. So the minute I did a 10-day course of that, 2 weeks later, I'm sleeping through the night, just like a baby. So there's so many intricacies. The other thing that needs to happen in your body needs to
Can I interject? What was that course you said when you was like 10 days later, you was sleep? What did you do?
I did. So there's a peptide. Peptides are, for your listeners, are breakdown products. They're amino acids, breakdown products of protein. We make 7,000 in our body naturally, and those also decrease in age. So I use epitalon. It's a type of pineal peptide. It is injectable just under the skin, and you do a 10-day course, typically 10 milligrams, 10 days.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'd also talk about blue light and people like not looking at screen. Obviously, we need that to get right. A lot of times people have on computers, they don't have blue light blocking software on their screens that's important. So what can I ask you something else? Like, what do you think of, because I know, and I do that when I'm jet lagged, but I also have been doing that like sometimes habitually where I just take a little bit of melatonin every night. I do it from jet lag. And then when I go east, right, like you said, but then I'm like, then it just becomes this thing where you just take it every day, just because you're like, I just want to make sure I sleep, even though I have never tested that. I really sleep well. What do you think of that? Because I think melatonin is marketed as this kind of healthy thing to take every night, instead of, obviously sleeping pills are bad. Can you share just about that? What your thoughts are on taking that daily?
Yeah, I love it. Right now, I don't need it. I probably should take a small dose so it doesn't make me groggy, but it is in the anti-aging realm. So small doses, you're going to produce less after 40.
Small dose. What
is a milligram? A milligram.
Okay.
Women need 1 to 10 milligrams. I was all the way up to 8. So I really wasn't producing it. Now
me out for 3 days.
Well, I was, once I did that patella, and I was like, why am I so groggy? Yeah. But yeah, you need serotonin and GABA to go up too. And some people who are chronically stressed or their microbiome is off, they're not making serotonin. So we talk about that. For the person who's not refreshed, one of the things I'll use is 5-HTP. You cannot use it if you're on an antidepressant because you can get something called serotonin syndrome. Please don't run out and get it. Talk to a practitioner. Typical dose can be 50 to 150 milligrams, and that usually restores the sleep. But let me share another clinical story. I have so many of these. A woman came in and Claudia, you mentioned blue blockers at night, not, getting morning light, same bedtime and wake time. And I say not only morning and night. We had one patient we had go out for 10 minutes, first thing in the morning, middle of the day, and at before 5 p.m. So 4:35. And just doing that, and it was really to help her with weight loss, but she says, oh my gosh, my energy is so much higher. So she didn't spend time.
I teach that too.
Yeah. And so the other thing I teach is there's a genetic mutation that can predispose how sensitive you are to Wi-Fi. And I always tell my patients for 1 week, I want you to turn off the Wi-Fi. In a perfect world, we'd just be wired in, right? And not have any, we do not have, we have the old fashioned security system. It's all wired in. We do not, the house is old enough. It has that. We do not have Ring and all this. And even I'm a little reluctant on the thermostats. I don't want, Bluetooth to be on and radiation to be emitted. It's already too high with just our routers. Turn it off. And 3 months later, I said, hey, are you still taking that 5-HTP? Is it still working? She's like, I turned off my Wi-Fi. I found I didn't need to do it. So that's a simple tip for your listener who's not refreshed. Just unplug it. And if it works for you, then go to Home Depot and buy the timer, which will shut the electricity off.
I have so many questions there. First of all, there's one on YouTube. I do want to address to us, but before, because usually I don't turn my Wi-Fi completely off. Sometimes I do, but I always have it on my phone. My phone is always on airplane with all of that. There's no devices near me in my bedroom. But I have a question. So I have the Aura Ring, like so many of us, right? And I have this is Thea, the continuous glucose meter. It's the Freezer Libre. And I turn the Bluetooth off all the time. And then it's like screaming, turn it back on so that the monitor can read your glucose levels. So I'm like, what do you say about that?
So the Aura Ring will record. You can at night. You can turn the Bluetooth off.
Right, but what about this?
Yeah, that one I'm not certain. So I'd say, all right, 2 weeks you're kind of stuck. So maybe don't use. Hopefully, what I say is, typically I'll have people wear a sensor for 2 weeks, gather the data.
I do that too. So I don't. But the type 1 diabetic might have to wear this all the time. And we don't. We just want to kind of optimize our diet and learn from this, right? Get the continuous blood sugar levels. Okay, well, we don't have to dive deep into that, but I feel like some of these health devices that are actually helpful, they all require Bluetooth, right? So it's yeah,
they do. And I like, when I use HeartMath, I like when people have iPhones because they hook right into the iPhone and it's not Bluetooth enabled. So I try to even headset.
HeartMath is a coherence way to kind of come into the relaxed state. So for those that have never heard, because when I first heard that, I'm like, what do you mean math and heart? How does that go together? I loved math in school, but that I don't think that applies to most people. So HeartMath, can I ask Mary's question just before we run out of time here? Okay. So Mary said, first of all, she said, it sounds like you're not in the US, which I think is not true. Where are you located?
Outside of Chicago. So
outside of Chicago. Exactly. So, and she's saying, I have MS, so multiple sclerosis, got COVID, lost my eyesight for a day. I do not have optic neuritis, and I've seen by many specialists. I have limited eyesight now. Could these free radicals be the issue?
That, and there's a whole so it could be free radicals, it could be plasmalogens. So that's a type of. There's a test I do, and they're neuroprotective, and believe it or not, people are deficient. And Jay Goodall, he wrote a book on dementia. I'll have to pull it up. I run the test on my MS patients only just to see, because they're supplying them. He makes a couple different products, and he's one of the only people to do it. But he says you can virtually, you won't damage the nerves beyond that. So, he now made them capsule form, which is good. Some of the taste on one of them was terrible and I couldn't get compliance, but So I'm grateful for that. But yeah, so many different things, but it could be free radicals. So that's where, you really have to do the deep dive and look at the genetics and look at the labs and do the stepped approach so someone doesn't make you sicker. So the sicker someone is, and I'm grateful to your listener who asked that question that they didn't have the optic neuritis. So it says that maybe the remainder is reversible. So you never know. Yeah, I always say don't. You never say never. And although you can never guarantee, I'd say that until someone's like pretty much in the coffin, there's always hope. There's always a chance that you're going to get at least to stopping the progression, or you're going to get improvement.
Well, that's wonderful. And I do want to remind everybody that this is not medical advice here, right? So we are just, we're just giving you, we're just looking at something that it could potentially be. And I'm putting, all the links are in the YouTube show notes, your website, and how people can find you and potentially work with you. Do you mentioned a little bit earlier that you work with some clients online. So I'm curious, so anybody that's not near Chicago, can they come work with you remotely, or how do you, because I'm super intrigued, because obviously a lot of even functional medicine, not everybody in functional medicine, or especially traditional medicine, would even know how to start with this stuff.
Yeah. So right now we have a program, I call it the She Reset, that my coaches can run virtually. So that is something can be done remote. It does take someone through the first D without having to lab test or needing, it's just so good. And it's where I crafted after 10 years, and where I reverse engineer, teaching people how to eat for their genetics without running genetics. And so that's run by my coaches. But I always welcome people. I'm like, why not just fly to Chicago? We have so many people who fly in. It's a quick flight in and a quick flight out. You only have to be there for one visit. And then for the remainder of the year, it's all virtual. And then you're looooking at, once a year.
So people could come in for one visit. I have a fantastic chiropractor who was on this program. He's in Los Angeles, but when I lived in Germany, I would fly in and see him and he has patients from Australia. So I think you're absolutely right. Especially if it's a one-time visit versus you have to come back, whatever. So that's right, a lot more feasible, even though flying is not the healthiest and environmentally best option, but at least you get your life back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people all the time, we talk to people sometimes 2 and 3 times, and then I'll say, hey, what changed? Why, if you haven't worked with us? And sadly, unfortunately, the longer they wait, the worse they get. And that worries me. One of your listeners asked, and I'll go over that 3D. I'll go through the 3D, 3S, 3M. And I do outline them all in my book that's coming out. So October 31st, but it is available for pre-order on Amazon.
Yeah, let me put that in the, I'm going to put that in the YouTube thing so that people can, I think we put it in there. Okay. So that people can, so it's a Kindle right now, right? I ordered
Kindle right now. Hardcover and paperback are coming out. And then probably after the new year, we'll do Audible, because I'm an Audible person. And it's really meant for the lay public. So practitioners will enjoy it, but it's not meant to be, textbook references. This is all my clinical knowledge on how I use the right steps in the right order. So the first D is diet and nutrients. And I have this whole task method to an abundant diet. So it's track, add, subtract, keep. And even other functional doctors get this wrong. And so there's lots of things that they get wrong, and we tell you how to do it right. And it really figures out how to eat for your type, whether you want to lose weight or not. Most people at least decrease the inflammation. The second D is digestion. So think of optimizing the microbiome. And it starts with the gut, but it can also be oral, in women, vaginal, in people, in other people, it's in their sinuses. And then that last D is detox. And I say, if you do the first 3 Ds, it'll balance the hormones. But I always say, don't wait to have your hormones balanced if you're considering them and you're suffering in silence. Suffering in silence is hot flushes that make you miserable, your mood's so out of control that people around you can't stand you, especially your loved ones, your risk of, having a breakup occur in a relationship. You don't want to get to that point. And I've had women come to me and they've been quote unquote optimized for 1.5 years. I'm like, why didn't that practitioner give you progesterone? That would have fixed all you already, or at least counseled you on it. So I don't, someone has to accept the risk and benefits. And my job is to explain it so they can make the appropriate decision. I can strongly encourage. And she says, and I said, oh, they can prescribe them. I'm like, oh, like you just now suffered for 18 months. Don't do that. The 3 S's are stress, sleep, and you're going to laugh at my third S, sex or movement. So it's for my exercise. Sex is the form. Hello. And we want to keep that libido high. I think women don't talk about it enough, and we should all, that should be a robust part. The last 3, and in detox, I always say toxic relationships. All right. So it's not just the environmental. And it took me a long time, at least I was in my 40s, but it took me into my 40s to say, hey, I'm just letting go of some people. I can't be around that. That's, it's not okay for them to influence. And I don't own anyone's opinion of you. If I could tell you one thing.
Honestly, I love that, because when I work with vision so many times, does it have to do with relationships and the relationship to yourself? And this is not romantic necessarily, right? It's a relationship with your family, your friend, like you said, sometimes, letting people go. And if you always feel drained after, hanging out with somebody, you're just, right? I mean, I think this is so important. And I love sex instead of exercise. I mean, it is a form of getting your heart rate up, right? And in a fun
way. And your releases oxytocin, which is good on all accounts, mood, bone health. And then those 3 M's are meaning in life. Okay. So one of our questions is, what is your purpose in life? It's right
hold on. What was it? Meaning? What?
Meaning, just meaning or purpose.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So what's your, and we find the people, and what the studies have found, if people who don't have purpose in life, I mean, they don't do as well. And think about, there's a great book written by Viktor Frankl, the Jewish doctor who survived the concentration camps. If you read the story, he was half dead 1,000,001 times. He should have died, but he had such a strong purpose in life and a vision of what he wanted to do that he survived. And his book is called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a quick read. It's definitely worthwhile for those of you that like to read or listen to it on Audible. Next one is meditation or mindfulness. So this is where we bring in the heart math to regulate that stress response. And the final M is management or time management. So a lot of us create our own stressors. Type in the chat, I'd love to see, or wherever you're chiming in from, who overschedules and then is stressed out by it. Now, I used to do this all the time, and I'm a high performer, and Claudia Steamy the last week was a big promo week. I was here, I was there, I was in the US, I was in Chicago promoting, then I was all over New York City promoting. But what I do now is, I don't have big laundry lists of what I'm going to do every day and hanging on my wall. Like, I had one project, it was a book launch. That's all I focused on last week. And it was very stepped and very doable. And I have help, and I delegate now, delegate to my kids. I hire help and delegate. And if you can't, then you got to take on less, and sometimes what that looks like is, some of these projects I had, and I'm super excited. In the fall, we're launching a women's community. So we're going to do a group program. It'll be that first D. It'll launch in the fall. So get on my mailing list and you'll hear all about it. We'll do a webinar, of course. So go to the group launch. And then we're going to segue into a women's community, just to empower women. And in the new year, I'll do the high performance. So the time management is one of the many pieces. So I trained as a high performance coach because I identified as one, but I didn't know how to coach people on how to maintain that high level. And why I did this, 2 reasons. One is I was not able to influence a patient to work with me, and she went on to die. Her sister and her had the same symptoms. I recovered the sister and not her. And it just broke my heart, because I'm not a salesman. My job is to deliver good information, good protocols, practice in high integrity, provide great service and results. That's what we want. I'm not a salesman. So high performance coaching talks about influencing, and it's a way of doing it. And influence meaning that you want someone to make the best decisions for themselves, not where you're influencing them to do something that's shady or whatever.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I cannot agree more with this, because I think I do. I mean, basically, except for the D's, because I don't really, personally work with the diet, detox, and digestion, in my own protocols, but everything else is 100% of what I teach too, because it's so important. And having purpose, we connect eyesight to having a vision for your life. And when you have that vision, when you know why clear vision is important to you, and it's not just an inconvenience to wear glasses, then you actually commit, like you said, you make that commitment to get better and to, because otherwise we have a bazillion excuses, we have other things, we have other expenses, time, right? Time management, then you don't prioritize, right? Unless it's, and a lot of times, I don't know what, I think you see the same thing. For you, it's probably pain, or like you said, somebody is almost or died. For me, I see a lot of times people are suddenly blind or they have severe, and then now they're coming like, okay, what can I do? How long does it take? I'm like, start early. Start when you get your first pair of readers, ideally before you get your first pair of readers, before you get all these problems.
Yeah.
Don't wait, right? I mean, can you echo that? That sometimes it's just like we wait too long, especially for ourselves, right? As women, as mothers, we give to everybody else, but when it comes to our own health, we put ourselves last. Do you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And, like I said, I have half a dozen people that have called me 2 and 3 times, including a woman today. I said, hey, going forward, I'm not going to be doing my calls just because there's not enough of me and more people want to see me. I'm happy to chat with you briefly, but I'm not really certain what I could add to this conversation that my assistant, who I recovered her acute lupus and was, on death's doors, feeling that awful and that disabled, what I could tell you that would be different. And at the end of the call, she was still, it was more of didn't value herself, the investment piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I can't say that enough. I'm like, and you hear it over and over again. I have a lot of high level executives that have been disabled, and they say you don't value your health until it's gone. And that's sadly, and it's not a scare tactic, but you won't know what that feels like till you get to the point. And I'm like, I already told you, like, I had a 20-year-old come in who wanted a pregnancy optimization, her health prior. She says, I almost canceled the appointment. Maybe I should just leave. Would you charge me if I just got up and left now? And I said, no, if you, no, like, then I was a little bit more relaxed. Of course I would now, because she's seated in front of me. Like, I've invested in reviewing her case, but I would have appeased her. I'm an easygoing gal. And she was one of the many that said, I can't believe how fantastic I felt. And we uncovered things that were going to be, she was actually, her liver enzymes were normal is 15 to 20. She was 150 and she felt fine. She had non-alcoholic fatty liver, and she ate healthy. She exercised without over exercising. She had 17 vitamin and mineral deficiencies, 17. So there you are. And she was exposed to toxins at work at a low level. So she wasn't clearing them because she had all these vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Her liver was taking a hit. It was based on her genetics. We reversed her liver enzymes in 6 weeks. And that's how quick it took her energy to come up. So that's why I would invite people. Like, I think most people could feel even better. So if you don't feel like you're Robin Williams and bipolar and like through the moon, then you don't have the energy. And only just because I've seen it, I felt it in myself. I see it all the time. So
this is so, and we got some comments on YouTube how informative and important this information is. And I forgot now what I wanted to say. I wanted to say something about what you mentioned earlier with people not kind of taking themselves or taking their own health serious enough, I forgot my train of thought right now. It slipped away. But I think it's so important to really, what I wanted to say, here's the thing. So with vision, right, I can just use this example. I don't know but people that have always had great vision their whole life, and then they get presbyopia, they get the readers, they're way more likely to invest into like vision programs because they have a very recent memory of how perfect their vision was and how easy, and they didn't need these crutches and they didn't,
Yeah.
But people that are, nearsightedness a lot of times happens in childhood or young adulthood or college myopia, right? Where it's almost like they've been so used to wearing glasses for 20, 30, 40 years, where there's almost like, it almost feels like it's part of my life. They can't, like I have sometimes found they can't even envision how it feels like to have clear vision. Does that make sense? Or sometimes, like you said in the beginning with the energy, we might all raise our hand, we have great energy. But when we don't really know, when we don't have a barometer, like knowing, like how would it actually feel like, right? You know what I mean? Like a simulator, like how would it feel like? Does that make sense? I think because with vision, I think it's easier to see versus literally to see versus sometimes energy. How do you know, right? Like,
yeah. How do you know that? Well, I would say if you are finding that you have a lull in the afternoon, or if you can't get to dinner and beyond, like you really should, like say your bedtime's 10 p.m. and then you get up at 6, you shouldn't start to feel tired till that last little bit. You shouldn't be getting to dinner where you're like, oh God, if I have to do one more thing, I feel like I'm going to collapse. So, and there's a lot more to it. When we talk about stress, we didn't even touch upon, and the stress is the adrenals, it's the thyroid, it's the sex hormones. I lump all the hormones in there. We talk about it, but there's so much to it, and it always starts foundationally, that 3Ds, and then you jump in, and we make people feel better physically, and then we get them buy in to do all the rest of the steps. It's my sneaky way, right? I always give people, I give them what they want, but I also on the back end provide what they need so they age well. And I'll have to come back for your listeners on the longevity piece, because there's definitely some things, the pipeline that you can, longevity, we start to age like the minute we're conceived, and particularly when we're born. But I'd say everyone needs some longevity screening at 20. And by 40, you better be implementing things to promote what we call as cellular house cleaning. And that's autophagy, because the things that's going to get hit is your eyes, your vision, and autophagy. A quick tip for your audience is, do intermittent fasting. You don't have to do every day, but every other day, eat in an 8-hour window. Start with 12 hours. If you can't do 8, eat in a 12-hour window. Everyone should be eating in a 12-hour window. And then think about longer fasts. That's going to increase the cellular cleaning, because when you don't clean house, then those cells become sleeper cells, and we call those senescent cells, and then they'll infect everything around them. And that creates a chemical inflammatory process. So it takes healthy cells around and it recruits them. So they become like a virus almost. It's terrible.
I want to talk to you for another 4 hours, but we have to, at least the YouTube live, we have to come to a close. This was so interesting. I think we just barely scratched the surface. So before we close off though, and we're going to have a little bit of time in my Clear Vision Club here, but what would you say are the top takeaways from everything we covered? Because we went pretty deep into the biochemistry as well. So what are some maybe top 3, whatever, top 5, what are some tips you can give everybody?
Yeah, I would say if you're 40 plus, before you need to be on some sort of mitochondrial support. And those are vitamins and minerals that fuel the mitochondria. I'm sure Dr. Claudia has some recommendations there. Number 1. Number 2 is, really prioritize the sleep, because that's going to take out, it's going to make you inflamed. And ultimately it's the inflammation that doesn't allow things to happen. And 3 is really toxic avoidance. And when I test people, I test everyone that will let me. The test is only in the $200 range. It's not super expensive any longer. Is that even people who are filtering air and filtering water and this and that, I'm finding high levels of 1 or 2 things. So be tested. If you can't filter the water, the most common thing in our water is gasoline from our gas stations is getting in, and city water is all contaminated, and bottled water is no better. Okay. So I switched to bottle while we were figuring out a filter, and my levels of the gasoline byproduct went 75th percentile to 95th. And it actually took out my mitochondria. Yeah. So my mitochondrial marker was through the roof, definitely dysfunction. So then we bought the filter. And so clearlyfilter.com is a simple thing. www.clearlyfilter.com. Pitcher is $80. So there's your quick fix for that. You want to filter the air in your bedroom. There's plenty of resources that Dr. Claudia can give you here.
But thank you for
I thought you were because she's your leader is so knowledgeable.
Thank you. So filter the air, filter the water, get some sleep, and then eat organic. And and then work with somebody to optimize your health, somebody like you who can actually, who gives you not just prescriptions, which is what the, traditional medical system does. They give you glasses and pills. And so thank you. Anything else? Any last word you want to add in?
Yeah, just the more you can, do what you can on your own. But like you said, there's so much. So in 40 and over, you're worth it. you deserve at least a consult with someone, whether it's in someone in your area or someone that that you've been referred to by a friend who's seen one, or, reach out to Dr. Claudia if you already work with her and you fixed your vision, you want to fix anything else, you owe it to yourself. It's just regular medicine is not going to fix your problems. Everyone expects it to, and it doesn't. But and I'm happy to stay on. I know, Claudia, you have to hop off, and I can stay on. Trisha will answer the questions for your private group then.
Yeah, one more thing I do want to say, I think sometimes we have this model, like we just kind of fall apart. And, when I years ago, I wasn't even eating that healthy. I used to work in an office, and I brought a salad to lunch, and everybody's like, why do you eat so healthy? Do you want to live to 100? And I think we have this model in our head that it's just inevitable. And I want to encourage everybody, neither are the glasses or the contacts or the eye diseases, nothing. It's all, you can actually prevent all this stuff, but you have to start what you just said. You have to start early. And I don't think it's sneaky what you do. I think the way, I wouldn't have started meditation if I had to do 2 times a day, 20 minutes. You start with like 2 minutes, right? And I have easy protocol in a 21-day program just to kind of start doing something, and then you see the results and you feel better, and then you move on. So I don't think it's sneaky what you do. I think it's just a way to actually get, people to feel better, and just otherwise they would be like, wow, this seems like too much, and I think that's how we humans are wired, right? If we are asked to do too much in anything, then we're just going to give up. Like, this seems like a steep mountain to climb that I can't really climb. So thank you so much. We put all your resources in there. Your book, you can get the Kindle or on Amazon now. And I have that already. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I can't wait to read it. And thank you so much for being here on the show.
You're very welcome, Claudia. And I'll stay on with Trisha, and we'll answer some more questions.